So I'm obviously a few months late to be making a video about A Complete Unknown, a film that came out in December of last year, but now that the Oscars campaign is done,
Adrian Brody.
When you get home and you tear up the little thing that you never had to use and you think to yourself, you narcissistic.
Timmy's shaved off his little press tour mustache and has dutifully taken a bow to the whole experience, I think now's finally the time for me to talk about the new Bob Dylan biopic. I thought I was giving mid-60s Bob, but I really just look like I'm trying to bring back early 2010s indie sleaze. I'd been hotly anticipating the release of A Complete Unknown, not just because I'm a big Bob Dylan fan, but because I'd already made a video on the other Dylan biopic from 2007, Todd Haynes' I'm Not There. This film takes a far more abstract and refracted view of the artist by having 6 different actors playing a version of the man depicted through 6 completely different styles of cinema. I believe this approach really lends itself well to a Dylan biopic because it captures the spirit of who Bob Dylan is, a shapeshifter, someone who is always 11 steps ahead of the rest of us. Like Todd Haynes himself said, the minute you try to grab hold of Dylan, he's no longer where he was. He's like a flame. If you try to hold him in your hand, you'll surely get burned. Basically, I'm Not There understands that Dylan cannot be understood. He's never just one person to himself or to us. He's a folk singer, a prophet, a song and dance man, a father, a contrarian, and synthesizing these different components to illuminate a compelling and challenging portrait of Dylan is why I consider I'm Not There to be such an innovative interpretation of the biopic formula. A formula that was expertly spoofed that same year with Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story. The perfect parody of the musical biopic, a genre that had been proliferating cinema throughout the 2000s, but the film's main target was the terrific 2005 Johnny Cash biopic, Walk the Line. This movie, along with Ray from the year prior, shifted the music biopic from made-for-TV melodrama and elevated it to prestige Hollywood Oscar bait. But it was specifically that prestige, self-seriousness that gave Walk Hard so much ammunition to make fun of what was quickly becoming a very cliched way to depict a life on screen.
He took the wrong son!
The wrong kid died.
And for a few years there, that overt style kind of took a break from our screens up until about a decade later, when movies like Rocketman, Straight Outta Compton, and of course, Bohemian Rhapsody returned to reheat the nachos of Walk Hard. And in case you're not watching this in the first half of 2025, what I mean is that these newer music biopics continue to, and even relished in depicting these same cliched tropes that Walk Hard had so cuttingly eviscerated way back in 2007. It didn't seem to matter for audiences, where Bohemian Rhapsody became the highest grossing music biopic of all time, making over $900 million at the worldwide box office. That is a hell of a lot of money for what I believe to be one of the worst movies of its kind, but I guess what the hell do I know? That biographical formula, despite being parodied to hell, really works on audiences, and the director of Walk the Line, James Mangold, recognized that, telling Entertainment Weekly last year, quote, "It's unfair to say that if someone makes a satire of a genre, it somehow has put a tombstone in the genre for all time. That seems a bit ludicrous to me." And he even admitted to enjoying the Judd Apatow film. "I found Walk Hard hilarious, but I also never understood why satire would negate making the real thing anymore." And that is perhaps why, after nearly 2 decades, James Mangold felt the time was right to return to the music biopic genre, where he has written and directed a film about none other than legendary musician Bob Dylan, starring Timothée Chalamet in the titular role. I'm now going to review the film, and because it's YouTube, I've broken it up into parts, and we're going to start with structure. So unlike I'm Not There, A Complete Unknown isn't some avant-garde reinterpretation of Dylan's life. Rather, it's a linear story of how the man went from being a complete unknown to one of the most celebrated artists of the 1960s and beyond. Adapted from Elijah Wald's 2015 book, Dylan Goes Electric, James Mangold was clearly wary of repeating the same trope-laden beats of Walk the Line, so this time it's not a cradle-to-grave retelling with some exaggerated depiction of little Bobby as a kid in Hibbing, Minnesota before he makes his way to New York at 19, nor do we receive an exhaustive depiction of Dylan through the late 60s into the 70s, getting married, having kids, getting divorced, finding Christianity in the early 80s, or mounting a comeback in the 90s. No, again, this film doesn't attempt to demystify the legend, rather it zooms in on the pivotal years between 1961 to 65 where Bob Dylan became a legend. And just so you know, I made a video where I assessed this period of Dylan's music as well as his remaining 60s albums, which you can watch over on my Patreon. I've recently lowered the cost to join, and there's now more than 50 monthly bonus videos on there from topics submitted by other patrons. Recently we had rock operas, last month it was my favourite song off of every Beach Boys album. I like to save my YouTube channel for bigger videos, but Patreon is a great way for me to explore more niche topics, and you can too for just $4 a month. Join for just one, watch all the videos and then leave if you want, but you can also enjoy other perks like my exclusive Discord and the feeling of being a good person by supporting someone who's currently fighting a copyright claim on a previous video, which is exactly why I need Patreon to help keep this channel alive. Links in the description, I promise you'll dig it. Now back to A Complete Unknown, and next I want to talk about the way music is used to inform the narrative. The film opens on Dylan in the back of a car at the end of his hitchhiked journey to New York City. What came before doesn't matter. This is where our story begins. And upon finding out his folk hero, Woody Guthrie, is in hospital in New Jersey, Dylan drops in on the ailing singer to pay his respects and, in his own words,
Maybe catch a spark.
Woody Guthrie serves as an important figure within A Complete Unknown's narrative, namely by having the film open with his song Dusty Old Dust, So Long It's Been Good to Know Ya.
So long it's been good to know ya. So long it's been good to know
A pivotal composition by the legendary folk singer and a massive influence on Dylan's early sound. In the film, I see it as a kind of curtain call for Guthrie and his generation of folk music, the era that fellow folk activist Pete Seeger wished to carry on. But while the lieutenant dutifully sits by the bed of the ailing master, ready to have the torch passed to him, a prophet emerges who, whether intentionally or not, will come to redefine the very idea of folk music. So long, it's been good to know ya.
So long it's been good to know ye. So
This scene is for me one of the strongest in the entire film, not only because it sets up this notion of folk music's past, present and future, represented by Guthrie, Seeger and Dylan respectively, but it's also the first and perhaps best instance of the way this film handles its music sequences. Prior to filming, almost all of the songs in A Complete Unknown had been pre-recorded with the actors singing and playing on modern microphones and equipment, which Chalamet has gone on to say is a safer way to do it, but it comes out too clean and loses that spark of doing it live.
We did these pre-records. I would listen it back and I'm like, man, this sounds too clean, you know? The recording equipment's too clean now, the guitars are too good.
And they ended up not using any of these pre-records in favor of singing and playing live on the day of shooting.
If I can actually do it, why should there be an element of artifice here?
And it's a good thing they did, because there is a kind of magic that gets transmitted through this process. For example, when Dylan plays Song for Woody on guitar in the hospital sung directly to his hero, Timmy diverts from Dylan's studio recording and holds on a note during the line that come with the dust and are gone with the wind.
It comes.
That would never have happened if we'd used the playback track. He's also holding it, which is like what a grand diva would do in the spotlight. You can't tell someone to do that. I'm not even sure Timmy completely plans it intellectually.
With the dust and her gone with the wind.
It was the first one we shot in the movie. You couldn't do it to a playback because it's such an intimate scene. It's in a hospital. I did it live in it, and it clicked.
It's an incredibly evocative moment and really speaks to Chalamet's talent in this role, but we'll get to him shortly. Right now I want to stay focused on the music in A Complete Unknown, because it is not only the engine of the film's narrative, but also its beating heart. Dylan's Song to Woody spoke of a funny old world that's a-comin' along, and what exactly that world will bring is hinted at in the very next scene where Pete Seeger gives Dylan a lift back to his home. Bob turns on the car radio and tunes it to a rock and roll station playing Little Richard's Slippin' and Slidin', a song and artist Dylan is very fond of.
There's a flip side on Long Tall Sally.
Asked by a cautious Pete Seeger if he's into rock and roll, and Dylan replies,
Well, I like everything, Pete. Except maybe, Patty Page and that doggy in the window.
I was also quite amused with Dylan's rambly answer when asked the fairly simple question of whether he considers himself a folk singer.
Well, I don't think to myself as a folk singer, you know, folk music thing. I mean, I do sing folk music. When I do, it's sort of a modified version or something. Not a modified version.
With Seeger concluding that a good song, a really good song, can get the job done without the frills. This scene is essentially the film's main tension, boiled down into a simple conversation about the merits of traditional folk versus rock and roll, and it's also the first example of Dylan showing discomfort with being pigeonholed. This discomfort, this desire to not be labeled as one specific thing, is kind of the defining trait of Bob Dylan, both the real person and the character portrayed by Timothée Chalamet. And because of this, we as the audience never actually get to the heart of who he truly is, what motivates him, what his beliefs are. But if the film did attempt to find that out, it would be in vain. It would be an inauthentic depiction of Bob Dylan because of how much the artist has always obfuscated his own agenda. This is ultimately the problem anyone telling Dylan's story will come up against. But thankfully, Mangold is hyper aware of this and uses this unknowable quality of the folk singer as a source of tension between his closest relationships. Sylvie Russo, the politically engaged young woman whom this Dylan begins a relationship with, says to Bob before she's due to embark on a 12-week trip,
"Think about how much I'm gonna miss you." And I realized I don't know you.
which sets up an argument about whether one's past defines them or not.
You never talk about your family, your past, besides the carnivals.
People make up their past, Sylvie. They remember what they want. They forget the rest.
How one's personal history provides a template for what they believe in or what they reject.
I tell you everything. My folks, my sister, the street I grew up on.
Yeah, and I never asked you about any of it. Well, you think that stuff defines you?
What I come from?
Ultimately, this insistence that Dylan has to remain mysterious ends up adding to his enigmatic status as an artist, but comes at a cost to his close relationships. But what about when he's not just a boyfriend or a folk singer, but the protagonist of a film? His mystique works to add tension between him and Sylvie or his audience, but what about this audience, the one watching a complete unknown? How do you make your protagonist engaging? How do you feel for them when they are insistent on not giving anything away? This film's answer? You do it through their music.
It ain't no use to sit and wonder why, babe.
If you were to strip away all the musical sequences in this biopic, you'd end up with a story of a cocky little wordsmith who's kind of a prick to the women in his life and stubbornly self-interested, abandoning those who have helped him to get to where he is in favor of chartering his own new frontiers. That is most of what you get from Dylan during the non-musical scenes. He's cagey, demanding, grouchy, selfish, and often seems like he's uninterested in conversing full stop. Which did make me wonder what clip they were going to use when Timmy's nomination came up at the Academy Awards. Because there really aren't that many scenes at all in this film that stand out as like the defining moment for Chalamet as an actor that don't involve him holding a guitar. I would say the only times we get close to truly understanding Dylan in lieu of his songs are in the moments where he's communicating that he refuses to be understood, like in the elevator after the party where he's made to perform for rich snobs.
200 people in that room. Each one wants me to be somebody else. And they should just fuck off and let me be.
Fuck off and let you be what?
Whatever it is they don't want me to be.
How do you sing then?
I put myself in another place.
Or with Sylvie a little while later.
Yeah, everyone asks where these songs come from, Sylvie. When you watch their faces, they're not asking where the songs come from. They're asking why songs didn't come to them.
Now these are two insightful moments, but I argue that it is by way of the lyrics and performance of Dylan's songs that our protagonist truly reveals himself. The music allowing the story to progress. You could even call it a quasi-musical approach. For example, when the threat of nuclear war is apparently imminent during the Cuban Missile Crisis, Dylan hunkers down in a bar and performs Masters of War.
All the money you made will never buy back your soul.
Or during the duet of It Ain't Me Babe with Joan and Bob at the 1964 Newport Folk Festival.
I'm not the one you want, babe. I'll only let you down.
Where Sylvie watches on and the fear that's been long plaguing her is all but confirmed when she sees the chemistry and connection between the two artists. One she realizes she'll never herself share with Dylan, who sings into the microphone,
It ain't me, babe. It ain't me you're looking for, babe.
which also makes sense for Baez and Dylan to sing together, as the two of them, though kindred spirits, are clearly not right for each other either. This song, perhaps more than any other in the film, signifies Dylan's solitary status as someone who cannot be tied to any one person or movement. This notion of Dylan extends to the final scene of the film, where after going electric at the same festival, he drops in on Woody Guthrie in hospital one last time, where we hear a repeat of the film's opening song, Dusty Old Dust.
So long, it's been good to know you. This dusty old dust is getting my own. I got to be drifting along.
My read of the song's reprise at the film's end is that it symbolizes Dylan's final goodbye to the folk scene that made him famous. He entered the story as a harbinger for the genre's future, and he leaves with the entire movement in his rearview mirror, off to discover a new frontier. So long, it's been good to know ya.
So long, it's been good to know you. This dusty old dust is getting my home, and I got to be drifting along.
Now, choosing to reveal Dylan primarily through his songs instead of, say, a beefier script may at times seem a bit contrived, even for a music biopic. But I do think this is an effective narrative device for telling a story about someone who gives away so little of themselves. And yes, sometimes it's more effective than others. Occasionally, the film finds itself shackled to its own genre. For example, during the first plays of Girl from the North Country, Blowing in the Wind, and The Times They Are A-Changin', we get these long-held shots of Pete Seeger, Joan Baez, or the entire audience at the Newport Folk Festival staring in total awe at Dylan, mystified by the sheer level of talent and craft on display. The film never feels more like a music biopic than during these moments, and while they are kind of cliche, another part of me thinks that it's also a totally realistic response to what's happening. I mean, come on, wouldn't you stop brushing your teeth or making a cup of coffee if you heard Blowing in the Wind sung live for the first time right in front of you?
Before they are forever banned.
I mean, obviously we have the hindsight to recognize that these are legendary songs, but even for the time, I would think this would be an impressive moment to witness, no? I mean, unless you're this guy.
That's enough. That's enough now.
Finish the verse.
And as the film progresses, the widening gap between the stodgy old folk scene and Dylan's bold, subversive new sound becomes a chasm, going from the recording of Highway 61 Revisited to quickly cutting to Pete Seeger's tiny black and white rendition of a song he wrote way back in 1958.
See me coming, you better run.
And while these songs do help to flesh out events and deepen the narrative, there is a limit to how much insight and context they provide for the period. Basically what I'm getting at here is that A Complete Unknown doesn't really dig too deep into any socio-political elements. The civil unrest that was occurring in the South and the threat of nuclear war is merely a backdrop for the songs and not a major thematic component of the film.
Well, that's that.
One might criticize this lack of political introspection, but in a way it really fits with the character of Bob Dylan, who, despite singing songs in the early 60s that were based around social unrest, the man himself was not overtly political.
Bobby was not really a political person. You know, in a general sort of way, yes, he was, but he was not interested in the true nature of the Soviet Union or any of that crap.
To be on the side of people who are struggling for something doesn't necessarily mean you're being political.
From what we know, Bob Dylan didn't really let on to the people close to him how he felt about what was happening at the time, so to incorporate scenes of him doing so in the film might make for a more thrilling screenplay, but it would again be disingenuous and a fabrication. I'll reiterate. The film can only present Dylan as he was, and who he was someone who kept his cards close to his chest, never aligning himself to any one ideology or cause, and so A Complete Unknown finds itself in this same position, which again is why the film leans so heavily on Dylan's music to reveal him to us. As Dylan said to Newsweek in 1997, quote, "The songs are my lexicon. I believe in the songs." Personally, I found Dylan's ambiguity in the film to be rather compelling at times. Like when he was watching Pete Seeger in the Wings performing Wimoweh to the crowd.
Add back in the lane.
I like that you couldn't really tell what he was thinking. Was he impressed with Seeger's ability to command the audience, or was he determined to outdo Pete, hungry to demonstrate how much further ahead of the game he himself was?
I'm gonna get you out there. I am.
Is he annoyed when Joan accompanies him on harmony while working out Blowing in the Wind? Or does it motivate him? It could be both or neither, but however you interpret it, all credit must go to the wonderfully nuanced portrayal from lead actor Timothée Chalamet. Which now leads me to the next part of this review, which is the performances. My biggest heaping of praise goes to all the actors who play musicians, because despite the pre-records being available, they demonstrated that they had the talent and the guts to perform live on set, and they all pull it off. Something that often irks me with music biopics is when they're filming the actors playing instruments, they'll often cheat it with a lot of quick cuts or shots that obscure what the actor's hand is doing so as to make it unclear if they actually know how to play guitar or not. But in A Complete Unknown, the camera holds tight on Chalamet and Barbaro as they navigate those complex chords and distinct fingerpick playing styles, and I found myself quite mesmerized on several occasions.
I was young when I left home, and I've been out rambling around.
I mean, I know Timmy had 5 years to prepare for this role, and one might think with all that time, it would be a given that he'd learn how to play guitar and harmonica, and that's a fair assessment. And maybe if the film wasn't delayed and Timmy shot this in 2021, his depiction wouldn't be nearly as vivid or as personalized, but you know, who's to say? Ultimately, the years of prep really paid off because Chalamet knocked it out of the park. He managed to channel that rare balance of Dylan's personality where he was both elusive and charismatic at the same time, cheeky but mysterious in equal measure. His physicality was actually the thing that I appreciated the most, especially noticing the difference between his 1961 ragamuffin looseness and his 1965 feline poise. Vocally, I thought he did fairly well, although more so when he sang than when he spoke. I think he nailed Dylan's accent, but the nasal quality of his voice was perhaps a little too pronounced.
My guitar's not even on me right now, so I'm gonna go see the guitar doctor backstage or something, you know? Look out, man!
Like if you listen to Dylan at any time during this period, he had quite a normal sounding speaking voice and enunciated words quite openly and clearly.
How can I answer that if you got the nerve to ask me? I mean, you got a lot of nerve asking me a question like that.
You got a lot of nerve taking a cigarette out of a man's mouth.
Chalamet's voice is a lot more tight and stiff, a result of how little he moved his lips when he talked.
Let's just talk over Newport Peak, because I ain't even planned anything for the set yet. You know, sort of living day to day these days, you know?
It's gonna happen fast, and you're not gonna get it all. And you might even hear the wrong words.
This didn't bother me too much, and only very rarely dipped into SNL impersonation territory, like when he said the word magazine.
Been on the cover of Time magazine.
Time magazine. Or meeting Bobby Newirth in the elevator.
I put myself in another place.
But when he sang Dylan's songs, Timmy really became Bob, particularly during the 65 period. I think that's when his singing voice really settled into itself, highlighted best when he performed Subterranean Homesick Blues, where he both looks and sounds just like the guy.
I get sick, get well, hang around, ain't well, hang well, hot to tell if anything is gonna sell. Try hard, get by, get back, rap real.
I happen to be just as good as him, a good singer. You have to listen closely, but I hit all those notes.
I also just want to shout out Timothée Chalamet himself for no other reason than for just being an extremely likable and chill dude. Like, I've been a Timmy stan ever since I saw him cry into that fireplace 8 years ago. In my opinion, this stick of butter can do no wrong, and it couldn't be happening to a seemingly nicer actor. I have a friend that, for whatever reason, is just determined to see Chalamet fail one of these days, and it's just so funny how for each one of his recent roles, be it Paul Atreides or Willy Wonka,
I'm making chocolate, of course.
Timmy just keeps winning, and no one is having more fun while doing it.
Bob Dylan! Bob Dylan! Okay! Bob Dylan!
Hey, get him going, get him going! Get him going! Get him going!
His press tour for A Complete Unknown was a total delight.
I got my dark sunglasses. I'm carrying for good luck my black too.
From sharing his knowledge of football stats and strategy on College Game Day,
I'm going Jackson State, 8 wins in a row, 11 all-conference players. This should be a comfortable, easy win for them.
to doing the Soldier Boy dance on the Broski Report,
A Complete Unknown in theaters December 25th.
to delivering one of the silliest but thoughtful Nardwuar interviews I've ever seen,
Milk does. I rip milk does. I'm talking 12 at a time. Chew, chew, chew. Suck the chocolate out. Soak in the caramel. Nardwuar demos on dan dum bon demon dum. Nardwuar demo don dim.
Timmy proved he's comfortable and compelling in virtually any environment. This guy just has the sauce. Like, what the fuck was this? Austin Butler could never get away with his shenanigans this batshit, and that is why Timmy's kind of my favorite of this whole crop of new movie stars. He is simply on another level. My favorite element of the press tour were the dozens of sartorial nods to Dylan's past looks. My top choice being the recreation of Bob at Sundance from 2003. I mean, how can you not be charmed by this? Infusing a glorious blend of goofiness,
Balls.
with a complete reverence for the subject matter of Dylan and his music.
This is a movie I'm absolutely the proudest of in my career. Let Me Die in My Footsteps is sort of Bob's first profound song.
Which is especially impressive when you learn that Chalamet is only a recent Dylan convert.
But truthfully, I didn't know anything about it.
And was actually brought up on hip-hop and artists like
Kid Cudi and the Lupe Fiasco and all the rappers I looked up to.
So to take on the mantle of Bob Dylan so enthusiastically and earnestly was a total delight to watch.
I get to be the voice of Bob Dylan. That's like the greatest honor of my life, truly.
Like, I have witnessed some of the most hardened and critical online Dylan fans completely come around on this guy purely from his playful approach and charming demeanor. I really do respect his determination to be, as he says,
one of the greats. I'm inspired by the greats. I'm really in pursuit of
greatness.
It's what every actor hopes to be anyway. Timmy's just transparent enough to admit it, and for me, he's already cemented himself as one of his generation's most iconic movie stars. You'll get that Oscar someday, Timmy. Elsewhere, I was equally impressed with Monica Barbaro as Joan Baez. Not only is she deeply striking in the role and manages to get close to Joan's stunning vibrato, but her speaking voice really impressed me too.
I had lessons as a kid, you know, normal lessons. I write too. I'm not sure there's a way to learn that.
Similar to Cillian Murphy's vocal uncanniness to actually sound like a man from the 1940s in Oppenheimer, Barbaro really seemed plucked straight from the early 60s whenever she spoke, and it gave her performance an extra authentic quality.
Well, gee, I hope the doctor can save his guitar. I'll play it for you.
Her Oscar nomination was totally deserved in my opinion. As was Edward Norton's as the friendly folk singer Pete Seeger. Norton's vocal likeness to Seeger was extraordinary.
This young man, he's been playing around town a bit, but I thought it was high time he took the stage at Folk City, so I want you to give a warm welcome to Bob Dylan.
And I remember Bob singing a song which really caused people to think. He's only a pawn in the game.
And his overall demeanor as the nicest guy in folk was a really refreshing turn for the actor who, it's been on record, can be a little difficult to deal with on set. It made me think about that Robert Pattinson quote where he says,
"You only ever see people doing the method when they're playing an arsehole. You never see someone just being lovely to everyone, going like, I'm really deep in character."
Yeah, right.
Like what if on the set of A Complete Unknown, Norton was offering cups of tea and passing around words of encouragement? He could have been, you don't know. I also really enjoyed Boyd Holbrook as Johnny Cash, who brought a masculine charm and roguish sense of humor to the role.
Bobby Dylan, come here, you. You know I read that last letter 6 times. That thing was economy size.
And was even better when he sang.
Blow my blues away.
And given that it's James Mangold directing, it must have been somewhat intimidating to be stepping in the shoes of Johnny Cash. Of the non-musicians, I feel like Elle Fanning has been somewhat overlooked as Sylvie Russo.
Dwight McDonald wrote a wonderful piece in here. I think you'll like him. He's contrarian, like you.
This role is a stand-in for Dylan's actual girlfriend at the time, Suze Rotolo, whose name Dylan requested to be changed out of respect for the fact that having died in 2011, she couldn't sign off on the film. It's kind of a thankless role, but I think Fanning brought a warmth and intelligence to the part that I really appreciate. These grounded performances really elevated the biopic format that A Complete Unknown worked within, but the one actor who kept bringing the vibe back down to Bohemian Rhapsody levels was Dan Fogler as Dylan's manager Albert Grossman. From his over-the-top reactions to his larger-than-life manager persona, I found his presence often rather jarring whenever he appeared on screen. He's also responsible for the biggest cliche music biopic moment in the entire film.
Who wrote this? He did.
But that's only a small critique of what is a superb ensemble cast. I mean, they just look great, don't they? Speaking of... Aesthetically, I think A Complete Unknown managed to look pretty damn good as a 60s period piece, especially given that it was shot digitally. Personally, I think Mangold should have stuck to 35mm film, like how he shot Walk the Line. I just think it adds a level of authenticity and analog cohesiveness, but despite shooting on different formats, I was impressed by how he managed to bring mostly those same aesthetics from the Johnny Cash movie into the Bob Dylan one. See, you can shoot a film like this digitally, and it doesn't have to look like a flat, lifeless MasterCard commercial. And you know what? I wouldn't be too surprised if the 4 upcoming Beatle biopics end up looking not too dissimilar to A Complete Unknown. Oh, and if you want to know what I thought of the wigs, I actually think they did a pretty great job here. It seems like they used Timmy's natural hair for the early years, but then that mid-60s fro was equally as convincing. The period production design, and especially the costumes, were also really well done and looked terrific. But while the aesthetic specificity was detailed and thoughtful, the film's overall look and feel was, dare I say, a little too safe. I think there was an opportunity for Mangold to switch things up visually from 1965 onwards, which is the exact halfway point of the film. The first half works as a more conventional biopic, but like how Dylan's music shifted so rapidly in 1965, I wish Mangold attempted to match Dylan's freak a bit here. Give us some amphetamine-infused music sequences, or use the camera to reflect Dylan's paranoid and occasionally psychedelic state of mind. For the music to change so drastically but not pair it with any visual differences felt like a bit of a missed opportunity. But then I realized I was just evoking the other Dylan biopic, I'm Not There, and it actually helped me to arrive at a conclusion for this video. So I think if I'm Not There didn't exist, I'd most likely be more critical of A Complete Unknown. I would probably say it's too sanitized, that it doesn't go into enough detail, that it plays it too safe conceptually and aesthetically. But what we now have are two films that work as companion pieces, the ultimate Bob Dylan double feature, if you will. See, I think A Complete Unknown is a really great film for anyone hoping to get into Bob Dylan. My mum, for example, was never really into his music, despite my dad being a big fan for decades, and it took for this film for her to finally express interest in Bob's life and music. And yeah, a big part of that is casting one of the most enigmatic actors from the Gen Z crowd to play the lead role. Like thousands of young people have now become newly minted Bob Dylan fans purely because this film stars Timothée Chalamet, and suddenly Dylan's music is hitting new heights on the Spotify charts. And looking at it more cynically, is that not a big part of the reason why these music biopics are made in the first place? Like, I would imagine it would be quite hard to convince a 15-year-old suburban kid to give a shit that Dylan's still touring and that they should go along and buy tickets to hear an incomprehensible version of Desolation Row. But make an easily digestible biopic starring Timothée Chalamet and you've captured a whole new generation of fans for life. The same thing happened to Elton John, the same thing's gonna happen in 2 years for the Beatles, and it hurts me to say it, but even though Bohemian Rhapsody was a dog-ass movie, I know full well that it created millions of new Queen fans. These aging artists in their twilight years are most likely considering their legacy very thoughtfully and speculating how their art can stay relevant after they're gone, and biopics are, for better or worse, an extremely effective way at netting a new generation of fans. Now, that's not to say that A Complete Unknown is nothing more than a vehicle for sustaining Dylan's discography. It's a solid and very enjoyable film that takes you by the hand into the world of Bob Dylan and his music. But if you're already a huge fan of this artist, you may have found A Complete Unknown a little underwhelming. But that is where I'm Not There comes in. I'm Not There is, I would say, the anti-A Complete Unknown. It doesn't hold your hand at all, and if you're not already something of a Dylanologist yourself, you'll probably find it pretty damn bewildering and strange. Like, something is happening here, but you don't know what it is. Sure, it's also a terrific exploration of mid-century cinema, but it's not unfair to say that I'm Not There challenges its audience, very much how Bob Dylan challenged his. So, to the people who have recently become massive Dylan heads thanks to A Complete Unknown and are now scouring through the basement tapes or tracking down bootleg demos, you'll now probably be pretty into I'm Not There. It's like the celluloid manifestation of Bob Dylan himself. And together you've got an accessible movie that works as the perfect introduction to the man, and the other a cerebral celebration of his life and work. So yes, I really did like A Complete Unknown, and although it somewhat only skims the surface, it's still a compelling gateway into Bob Dylan, and it's a film I can recommend to just about anyone. But really, my biggest gripe with the movie is that it didn't star a CGI chimpanzee. That's right, next video we're talking about Better Man, the actual best music biopic of 2024. Get subscribed so you don't miss it in your feed. I am dead serious about this. And if you're uninitiated with the film, you're about to be. Too many people have been sitting on this film and the time for that must come to an end.
Dylan, or the artist formerly known as Lil Timmy Tim. It's time to do my dance, pull up your pants. That's actually great, y'all.